We are now talking to Fangraphs senior writer, Dan Szymborski, right? Szymborski, right? Am I right?
Well, even in the original Polish, my last name is absolutely horrible. So
Szymborski.
Yeah, that sounds more Italian, Szymborski.
Szymborski.
Yeah, it's a very difficult name. None of the letters really look like they go together. So as long as we get my first name, and the thing is, they don't always get my first name right. I had an editor that kept calling me Dave. It's like you got the last name right, but you can't get Dan right.
Really? I mean, I can obviously pronounce your first name, Dan. I have a lot of friends named Dan. I mean, but your last name, Szymborski. I mean, he was trying to pronounce it to me. I was like, how? He's like Szymborski. So there you go. Anyways, how are you? And tell us a little bit about Fangraph and how you became a writer for them.
Well, it's been a long story. I kind of got involved in the sabermetric community in baseball in the 90s. And as I always joke, I kind of hung around smarter people than me and kind of tricked them all into thinking I was smart too. Eventually, Moneyball came out in the early 2000s. And as I always say, we kind of got respectable at that point. I was blogging at the time. I started writing for ESPN in early 2010. I wrote pretty exclusively there until 2018. And then I joined Fangraphs. For many reasons, but I've had a long history of collaboration with the Fangraphs gang. And, writing about baseball is a really fun job. So if I complain too much, I mean, that would be kind of gross.
So as a writer, as a baseball writer, you look at the league and the sabermetrics and the WAR, and we were just arguing in the beginning of the show about Ohtani, and obviously Vladimir Guerrero. I think Vladimir Guerrero was disrespected at the end of the season. I thought he was the MVP. His statistics really stood out as an offensive player. Obviously, he's an everyday first baseman. He's not as good as the top first basemen like a Rizzo or a Freeman, but he's a fantastic player all around. Were you surprised, honestly, that Ohtani won all 30 votes as the number one MVP of the league last year?
I wasn't, because when it comes down to it, I mean, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a better hitter than Ohtani. There's no question about that. But since the MVP is kind of this hybrid, it's a hitter award, but sometimes it's also a pitcher award. Then you do look at that, and Ohtani did. He's a pretty good pitcher in addition to a pretty good hitter. I do think that baseball generally would do better to have kind of an explicit batter award. I mean, the Hank Aaron Award doesn't really have the same kind of cultural cachet that the MVP award does, because the Cy Young Award is for pitchers only, and it's kind of weird. You don't give a hitter Cy Young Award if he was really good defensively. That would be kind of interesting and fun, and they probably wouldn't let me vote again if I did that, but I think I would have picked Ohtani. I didn't vote in that award, but I love Vladdy. I love Vladito.
No, but everybody says, boom, another writer says that Ohtani should have won the MVP. But I also, and you're looking at Ohtani because he was a pitcher. That's why you're saying that he should have won the MVP. But if you look at Ohtani's numbers last year as a starting pitcher, they really didn't stick out as amongst the league's best. I mean, his ERA, when you look at pitching statistics, you look at the ERA, you look at the WHIP, you look at the walks. I mean, amongst the league, ERA, I think he was 23rd. WHIP, he was like in the 30s or the 40s. Or something like that.
3.18. He was tied for 24th in MLB, 10th in the American League.
Right.
These are among
I don't
pitchers.
care. Just tell us at the major leagues. I don't care about the American League.
1.09 was tied for 23rd in MLB. And Dan, to put it in perspective, I used it for 20-plus starts for starting pitchers. I know that wasn't the qualifier. I actually looked at Fangraphs, ironically, to do that. The qualifier was a certain amount of innings on that, but I used 20-plus starts.
But think of it this way. With Ohtani, like, say you start out with his hitting stats.
Right.
No, they weren't like Vladdy's, but he still hit 46 home runs. He still had, an OPS near 1,000. Now, we do count, defense for a player when we're evaluating the MVP award. If they're a great defensive shortstop, a great defensive first baseman.
Right.
In a way, a pitcher is a defensive position, and he's literally doing a very important job preventing runs. It's kind of a philosophical thing because the MVP award doesn't clearly define whether we're voting for hitters, whether we're voting for pitchers. So in a situation where you have a very good pitcher who wasn't quite elite and a very good hitter who wasn't super elite,
right,
that the person could do both of them is what made him just above and beyond in the eyes of the voters. It's kind of like one of those, those like super pickup trucks that can go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's like, yeah, you have faster supercars, but you also can't bring a couch in a Bugatti or something.
So I want to ask from a different perspective with Ohtani. So being that he's a two-way player, the influence that kind of thing has on the game. We're seeing a couple more teams try to develop him now. Hunter Green just started the year with the Cincinnati Reds, a guy that was a top 5 pick. We've seen the Rays have a couple of them too. Do you think that's going to be a big influence, or do you think Ohtani is just a one unique type thing where he's going to be the only one like that, or the only one at that level?
I think he's going to be the only one at that level because it is a rarity. You look at baseball history, even when more attention was paid to pitchers hitting, they didn't really hit all that well. You look at someone like Wes Ferrell in history, who actually hit pretty well, but he wasn't like a star offensive player. That Ohtani could do both is what kind of makes him a unicorn in a way. I mean, we've had two-way players. I remember Brooks Kieschnick with the Cubs. Oh, God, that was a long time ago now. I'm getting old. But I think that teams will look at it because it's fun and it's efficient for a roster spot. Ironically enough, without pitchers actually hitting, doing that actually becomes a little less valuable. But, teams are always trying to innovate in this way.
We are talking to Fangraphs senior writer Dan Szymborski. So I got it right now, Szymborski. See, I'm pretty good after the second time around. Now, we're going into the season, 6 games into the season, and obviously the Yankees and the Mets here in New York. The Mets right now, their bullpen has not looked good. The Yankees' bullpen has looked fairly good. Their rotation has been horrible. What are your thoughts so far early in the season with the Yankees and the Mets?
Well, the Yankees, they're a team that they did not really do as much in the offseason as I expected them. They was a very passive team. George Steinbrenner, this would not have been his kind of offseason. Hal is a different matter than George entirely. I was really disappointed they didn't go a little harder after Trevor Story. Yeah, they have some great shortstop prospects, but no team has ever said, "Oh, we have too many great players in the infield. Whatever are we going to do?" That's happened, 0 times in history. The Mets, I mean, they're winning games at least. And generally with the Mets, you just don't want them to completely explode. As long as there's kind of winning, you just be happy with it.
So a lot of the rule changes that came out after this lockout, is there one in particular that you like, and anything that you were surprised wasn't changed when it came to these players?
I was really sad to see the biggest change, I think, was the end of those sudden death, game 163 of the season. I love those games, and they're taking them away from us. That there's no game 163 when there's a tie, and playoff spots will be all determined by tiebreakers. And that's understandable in football because the players are killing each other. But baseball is less physically difficult. You can play 7 days a week. You could play that game, and I'm just very, very sad to see that rule change.
We look at the game, and obviously this offseason, the money that some of these players got, Simeon got the money that he got having a good season with the Blue Jays. He bet on himself. He won. We've seen Seager get a $300 million contract, obviously overpaid. Lindor last year got a $326 million contract, didn't really earn his money last year. Hopefully he plays better this year. Are you surprised when you look at the contracts that we have seen over the last 2 years to be over $300 million for these players?
I'm not really, because age is such a large component of projecting any player. I've run some numbers on projections for players, and you take a guy who's a free agent at 26 versus a guy who's free agent at 30, and it literally halves the expected future value of their play. And we're at a time where teams promote minor leaguers aggressively. We're in an age with a lot of young phenoms because, a lot of these guys have hit the market very young. Manny Machado hit young. Mike Trout would have if the Angels hadn't extended him. Same with Fernando Tatis Jr., Wander Franco. You can go on and on and on. We are in a phenom age, and when these guys hit free agency at 25, 26, even 27, that's a huge opportunity for a team because you're not having to pay for age 38, 39, age 40 seasons. That's where those contracts for players like Pujols tend to fall apart because you're already investing in like 3 or 4 seasons where you don't even think they're going to be good. And in Pujols' case, it was more than that. So I'm not surprised by these numbers. We saw a little taste of it when A-Rod hit free agency originally because he was very young also.
So we've had a lot of different baseball guests that have been asked this question. When it comes to the Dodgers lineup, a lot of people are saying it could be the best lineup on paper that we've ever seen. So with your statistical analysis, the advanced data you do for Fangraphs, where do you stand on that matter?
I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration because one, you still have Cody Bellinger, who might be essentially a pitcher offensively in the lineup, taking away the DH. Chris Taylor is fine, but he's not a superstar. There's questions about Max Muncy's platoon ability. Justin Turner isn't the player he was a few years ago. I think that was excitement from the Freddie Freeman signing. Now, don't get me wrong, the Dodgers are a very good offense, but I'm not sure that we could call them any kind of legendary status, which I think some people have gone on about.
We are talking to Fangraphs senior writer Dan Szymborski. Now, Dan, we go through the league, and baseball is just so very interesting with statistics, and obviously we were talking about WAR, but we've seen a lot of these players develop into superstar players as they progressively got older and became better, more talented players. Now, over the last couple of years, we have seen some pitchers really stand out, some young pitchers in the league. Is there a pitcher right now that you have seen over the last 3 years that has stood out? I'm not talking about Ohtani, obviously winning the MVP, because I don't look at him as a rookie. I'm talking about the young players, the 20, 21-year-olds. Is there a pitcher that really has stood out to you in the last 3 years that has popped out statistically?
Well, I think one of my favorites and one of my favorite breakout candidates generally every year is Sandy Alcantara. I love watching him pitch. He doesn't get as much attention with the Marlins. His command improved so much from pre-COVID to post-COVID that I think he is kind of on the cusp of becoming a serious Cy Young candidate. Another player I've loved for a while is Logan Webb. My projections for him actually had him with the 6th best ERA among starting pitchers for this season. He's done nothing so far to say that's a bad projection because a lot of projections are going to be bad projections. So those are two of my favorite youngish pitchers. They're not 22, 23, but COVID kind of delayed development. I guess if you go a little younger, Grayson Rodriguez of the Orioles. I love his stuff. His command is improving quickly. The Orioles are still going to stink, of course, but it'd be nice to have a pitcher, especially with John Means injured. You're going to have someone. The games have to end at some point.
He's injured now, and he might get traded, so they have to have somebody. So I wanted to ask this because a lot of these pitchers are being used more in different roles with the bullpens especially. There's not as many great pure closers, and we see the starting pitchers do openers. Do you think that'll end up being more of a norm? Because right now it's only certain teams that are doing it. Some teams do it for the playoffs because of the way these stats are advanced now.
Well, you have a few things working here. One thing that you see with pitchers is that hitters go max effort on all pitches these days, and that makes kind of, once they start getting tired the third time through the order, it does get dangerous. Now, you don't pull Max Scherzer, or if you value your life, but you are going to continue to see relievers be used aggressively, and relievers are considered more of kind of a unit than like one closer and then the lesser guys, because every pitcher has a role. Every pitcher, a lot of these closers have different types of stuff. I think that the role of a reliever has evolved in baseball over the decades. You look back at the 70s, and there was kind of this concept of an ace reliever. They weren't really there just to get saves, but they racked up a lot of innings in relief, multiple inning outings. You look at like Goose Gossage, and even in the 80s, you look at like someone like Mark Eichhorn, who had like 150 innings in relief in like 60-some games. Right. So that role is still going to continue to evolve in baseball.